What's going on, everyone? Welcome to episode 3 of Shout at the Plate. You got Max, George, Chip, and our first ever guest panelist, our coach, our guru, calling in from the Golden State. We got umpire extraordinaire, head coach extraordinaire, Ben Brown with us today. Ben, how are you?
A lot better now. It's wonderful to see you guys talk some baseball. So this is exciting. It's
George, you
just
forgot
like old
player
times.
manager.
Oh yeah, player manager, playing right field for a game.
Over three strikeouts.
That's okay. That blends in with the rest of us.
That's how our team played.
One good defensive play. I'll take that.
Hey, there you go.
That's more than most of us can say.
Seen us practicing on the green. Come on.
Yeah.
Made a couple costly errors in my day. May or may not have stolen a win from the
That Yale game.
Stolen a defeat for the Jaws victory against Yale, but whatever.
That Yale game. That was a gem, and you just threw it away.
In my defense, if it wasn't me, somebody else was going to do it.
Fair.
Yeah.
That's usually how our games went if we weren't getting mercied. But hey, we won against Emmanuel and Harvard that year. So positives. So we got some new power rankings in MLB today. MLB.com releasing their first power rankings of the year. And it's an interesting list with how the first week plus of the season has gone. Got the Dodgers, Blue Jays, White Sox, Astros, Mets, Yankees, Giants, Rays, Padres, and Cardinals in the top 10.
Wow, I hate
Best record in baseball right now, just to start this conversation, is shared by the Dodgers and Giants at 7-2. They have nearly identical run differentials, and yet the Dodgers are number 1, the Giants are number 7.
Yeah, I mean, but it's been like 9 games. Like in my view, the power rankings for now should be pretty identical to where they were, before the season, barring injury. Like I think you can knock down the White Sox, right? Because they have uncertainty, with Lucas Giolito. They have some other injuries in the bullpen. So I think barring, something that is real and tangible like an injury, it's sort of silly to be doing weekly power rankings in a sport that is as long term and as much of a marathon as Major League Baseball. But like the Giants are clearly building on and continuing their incredible breakout season from a year ago. Like we've seen them do it over a full year. And I don't think they got worse. I think the addition of Carlos Rodon has the potential, with their pitching development factory to be, a real barn burner. So I think that like the Giants being 7 is a little bit silly, but yeah, the Dodgers should be 1. I mean, they're the Dodgers. They're the Dodgers.
You mentioned the idea of, tangible things in considering power rankings. I disagree that at this point they should look like preseason rankings. I think at this point they should reflect only what we've seen in the season. You have tangible results from 9-10 games from a lot of these teams. Rank based on that. The Yankees are 5-5. They shouldn't be in the top 10.
So I think, George, part of that, and Chip, what you said to both your points, is that there's such a gap between what we think power rankings should be at this point. Why even do them? I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's not going to change the outcome of games. I don't think it's going to motivate or demotivate players 9 games into the season. I think this is more of just a way for fans to stay involved throughout the game, throughout the season early on, because it's hard, right? There was already almost 100-day lockout, short spring training. MLB has some of the worst broadcasting in all of professional sports with blackouts and, local listings and all that garbage. So, I don't, to a certain extent, they don't matter really ever. But especially not now, I think. Power rankings are for the fans' enjoyment, and, they're not for players. They're not to be taken that seriously at this point, I don't think.
They're for people to argue on Twitter and for the four of us to argue on a podcast.
Exactly. And it's fun to argue about it, right? Like, I'm not saying that I would say they should get rid of the power rankings. I just think that they don't matter that much right now.
Yeah, it's not so much like the NFL where week by week you see the power rankings more clearly indicative of what you have in the league, because that is week by week, week by week. This is a game that's 162 games over 6 months. It's day by day. It's inning by inning. It's not, 4 quarters and then you move on to the next Sunday.
Yeah.
It's a lot more. There's a lot more of the minutia in baseball that you have to consider with rankings. And, maybe you don't start them until the All-Star break. Doing them in April. What does that
Yeah,
say?
that's fine. But it also, it could be. I also think that the way that rankings are done is cumulative. It's not that, week one is going to determine where you stay for the rest of the year. You could go 2 weeks and go, 2-12, and it wouldn't matter, because in September you could go off and win 25 games. And that 2-week period isn't going to matter because you've already made it up in September.
Ben, what are your thoughts?
What's the methodology of the power rankings? Is it really just as simple as the top 10 hottest teams subjectively?
The way I understand MLB's, I wouldn't really call it a formula, but their methodology, I think that's a good word to use. It considers win-loss record, probably first and foremost. You look at run differential, just to see how the offense and pitching staff are contributing to this point in the season. I think in the case of the Yankees, who are ranked 6th here, it's their pitching staff that have them in the top 10, because that offense has scored 30 runs over 10 games. So I think looking at the two sides of the coin for each team is a big part of putting the rankings together. But again, at this point in the season, you're probably looking at preseason predictions, preseason, outlooks. Everyone's got the Dodgers going to the playoffs. They're going to be the number 1 team until they're not. Until there's a week where they go 1-6, which is that going to happen this year? They're probably not going to leave the top 5 given where they're expected to go. So I think expectation has a big role to play in that.
Yeah, but I mean, shouldn't it? Like, if we're basing power rankings that currently exist off of what we've seen so far, I mean, you're operating in sample size land where you're not getting any meaningful conclusions about anything.
Which brings up the point again about why do it this early?
Because it's fun, and because it gets people's fans on Twitter really mad, and it drives up engagements. Like Max said, like all right, let's say they leave, the Mets outside the top 10, right? And then all the Mets fans are going to go in the reply and say, "Oh my God, you hate the Mets. The league is rigged against the Mets."
No one hates the Mets more than you.
Yeah, which you'd be forgiven for believing, because if the league were rigging things against the Mets, it would not look very different, ever. But like, it's really just driving up engagements, and it's a social media thing where you just rile up a subset of your consumer base as much as possible, and you get paid for clicks. It's very much it's like when Colin Cowherd releases like that quote graphic that says I think Joe Burrow is the best quarterback of all time, and that Tom Brady doesn't even belong in the Hall of Fame, or some stupid nonsense like that. And then everybody freaks out in the replies, and he drags those engagements all the way to the bank. I don't know. I think it's part of a broader culture within sports of this, or at least sports media, of clicks and not debate, because it's not really debate. It's just like anger and annoyance driven click farming. It works though.
it's ease of consumption. That's kind of where we are as a country. We want the uncertain to be broken down into something so bite-sized. Here, I'll even make a comparison since my mind immediately goes to colleges because of my profession. The U.S. News and World Report rankings. Maybe
Right.
we peruse those when we were going through our respective college searches. Does anyone really know the methodology? And if you look at it, a lot of the methodology of those U.S. News and World Report rankings are kind of frivolous. They talk about faculty salary. That's kind of how I'm seeing power rankings. I'm looking at formulas like ESPN has their own ranking, 25% team winning percentage, 50% opponents average winning percentage, and 25% opponents average winning percentage. There are just so many variables, so many statistical variables lying underneath all the methodology and breakdown. So, as I kind of listen to what you're saying, George, and what you're saying, Chip, kind of on opposite sides of the spectrum here. Maybe there's a way to calibrate power rankings to make it more predictive, make it look more at strength of schedule, projected ERA plus, which Baseball Prospectus has done for years, predictive statistics. So, and also, what are we at now? 12 teams expected to make the postseason.
Yeah.
So your top 10 plus 2 teams outside the power rankings on any given, 2 additional teams outside the power rankings at any given moment will make the playoffs. It's not a perfect system.
Yeah,
No.
you look at the Braves last year. All you have to do is be that one of those last teams in and get hot. It's so fluky like that.
Yeah, that's the way baseball playoffs have always been. And I think that's going to be a huge thing with the 2 extra teams that you bring up, Ben. Just seeing, a division winner is now not guaranteed an automatic pass to the division series. The worst division winner is going to play a best of 3 wild card series. You get an extra wild card team in there for teams like the Blue Jays or Seattle last year who missed the playoffs by 1 or 2 games. The Blue Jays would have been in the playoffs last year under the current system. They would have played the Chicago White Sox, were the 3rd seed in the AL last year. Yankees and Red Sox still would have played, but it would have been best of 3. So this new system, you talk about top 10 teams plus 2, and you talk about teams that get hot in September. It's all connected in how October is going to shake out this year, because that's the bottom line, is which teams are built for October throughout the course of the season, but also which teams are in the right place at the right time. Which team gets an outstanding performance from Barry Zito in Game 5 to save the season.
Yep.
So I want to transition here to what I think is, and what we all think is, one of the big talking points in the league today. And it has especially come up with this new generation of young superstars. You talk about Fernando Tatis Jr., you talk about Juan Soto. All of these, we'll call them kids for the sake of the expression, and the expression, let the kids play. Talking about written rules, unwritten rules, perspective on those, why people get so angry about them. What do you guys have on this? And I know, Ben, as an umpire, it's your job to sort of police, I don't know if that's the right word you'd use, but to sort of ride the terrain of the feel of the game with both written and unwritten rules. So you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, kind of acting as a mediator there. And fortunately, at the high school level, I don't think you see the same flair, for lack of a better word, because these aren't professionals. I think a lot of coaches are really concentrated on sportsmanship, which I think if you compare that to what that looks like at the major league level, those sportsmanship values may come across as a little bit antiquated. for people who are familiar with the pro game and not so much the American Legion ball or high school ball. So you don't see that vigilantism at all at the high school level. And if you suspect that someone is throwing at a kid, that's a safety issue and it's very clear cut. Gone, probably a suspension. But unwritten rules at the major league level. You're right. It's evolving, and I see that as a good thing. It means that baseball and Max, we talked about this a lot, especially when Jackie Robinson Day kind of rolled around. Baseball, it's progressive, but it's not. It was really the first sport to have widespread integration, but it took time, and baseball is still dealing with that ugly past. Guys being called flashy, that's kind of almost a euphemism for people displaying emotion coming from different cultures. There's almost some racial undertones to it, regrettably. But yeah, the fact that Major League Baseball is starting to endorse that, I think we're being a lot more inclusive of different styles of play, different backgrounds, different upbringings, and bringing those more into the forefront instead of having them exist on the margins and regarding them as sort of an annoyance rather than something that can be used to promote the game. That seems like a good thing to me.
Yeah, I completely agree. One of the things that I think about most prominently within the past couple of years was, I think it was Max Muncy took Madison Bumgarner deep. I think it was when Bumgarner was still in the Giants.
Was still with the Giants, yeah.
Yeah. And, Bumgarner started chirping at him as he was rounding the bases. And, that thing in and of itself, I'm actually okay with, right? I'm okay with pitchers firing themselves up. It's part of the game too, just as much as it is for a batter to pimp a home run, to slowly jog around the bases, do whatever he wants. I think it gets different when you take it off of the field. When you start complaining about it in the media, on social media, in the press, whatever, that's kind of where I have the biggest issue, is because, one, this is a game. It's baseball. It's part of it. Guys are going to hit home runs. Guys are going to strike other guys out. And I'm totally fine with showing emotion, and even at other players. I think that's fine. But my issue is just bringing it outside of the chalk, because I think that's unproductive. I think that is regressive for baseball. It draws attention to the wrong thing. I think what you'd want to focus on and spotlight there is two guys that are competitors going at it, and not some stupid petty argument about the unwritten rules of baseball. And I don't actually remember, George, you might know better, did Bumgarner bring it up in the media afterwards, or was he kind of just like, it's a thing that goes on?
I can't recall off the top of my head, but knowing how Bum operates, with his, as a Giants fan, lovable hard-headedness, I think is a good way of putting it. He's the kind of guy who wouldn't let something like that go. He wasn't, just speaking from watching his post-game pressers with the San Francisco media, he's not the kind of guy who would, chirp at Muncy on the field, when Muncy says go get it out of the harbor or whatever he said. Bumgarner's not the kind of guy who would go to the media and start complaining about the unwritten rules of baseball. He's the type of player who would keep it on the field. There are other players, though, who would say, yeah, I didn't like that. So, I think of Kevin Cash when the Yankees and Rays were going at it a couple of years ago, talking, as a manager of a ball club, we got a whole stable of guys out there who throw 98 after Aroldis Chapman threw behind Mike Brasso in 2020. That's a threat. Baseballs are projectiles
Yeah.
that pitchers throwing that fast, batting helmets are great, but that can really hurt a person if you're throwing intentionally. And, I've maintained for the last, year and a half that what Kevin Cash said wasn't okay. And it remains not okay. You can't say my guys, you can't imply my guys are going to throw at their guys, especially to the media. I mean, those comments were just absurd. What I think was a positive outcome of the situation was in that American League Division Series out in San Diego, Yankees-Rays playing in the pandemic playoffs, where Mike Brasso, less than a month later, took Chapman deep for a huge home run in Game 5 of the ALDS. That's keeping it between the chalk. He was fired up rounding the bases. His teammates got hype. That is probably, I mean, it hurt me as a Yankee fan to watch, but that is probably the best outcome for that situation. Not saying, my guys are going to hit their guys in retaliation, because retaliation, it's part of the game. Pitchers know that they're going to get thrown out, suspended, what have you. But it's not really okay in the sense of the unwritten rules of the game. That's not how these things should be handled. You should, if you're given the opportunity, take that high fastball, take that hanging slider, and send it 450 feet out to left field. That's how I love when situations like this play out in a way. Bumgarner and Muncy is another example. When you can keep the fire and the passion of, that guy's chirping at me after a big home run, keep that on the field, which I think, Max, is what you were saying about, not going to the media and complaining about it or whatever. Keep it between the chalk.
Yeah. I mean, that's just dumb, right? Like talking about it after the game in a way that is complaining, right? Of course, you're going to get asked about it. And of course, you're going to try and answer questions to the best of your ability. That's not what I'm talking about. What I mean is just don't go complaining about it, right? Like, and definitely don't go imply that you're going to have your bullpen throw at other guys. I'm completely on your page with that one, George. I mean, I think on the topic of actually hitting guys, if it does end up at that situation, there is the other unwritten rule of, you hit the guy, you move on, and that's it. That's the retaliation.
Yeah, you're going at it, every
Yeah.
half inning throwing at the guy.
No, it's and you don't bury one in the up near his shoulders. You drill him in the thigh or lower back, something like that. And that's sort of the unwritten written rule that pretty much everybody subscribes to. But again, sometimes things happen. Pitchers will often go after the star player instead of the next batter up. So some guys don't feel like they're protected, and then it gets even more complicated for no reason. And that is, I think, another situation where it gets harder to keep it in between the lines, right? With Brasso, he's no superstar. It's not like he was Wander Franco or I don't know who the star of the Rays was at that time. Maybe like Austin Meadows.
Austin Meadows.
Yeah.
Probably the big name.
Relative for the Rays, I guess. But yeah, I mean, there's so many different variables that go into this. But I just think generally keeping it in between the lines and even letting umpires kind of butt out every once in a while is good too. I understand that when warnings are given that a hit by pitch is under the umpire's discretion before tossing player and manager. But, I think if a guy gets drilled, warnings are given, and then the next step is retaliation, and it's done in a way that is the right way to do it. Like some guy gets hit in the thigh or in his butt, then I don't know. I don't really see the reason for things to escalate any further to an ejection or a suspension like that.
Yeah, and Chip, you were tweeting up a storm when the Mets were getting hit a lot early this year. You want to talk about that?
Oh, I mean, I wasn't like, like it was so bizarre because they had gotten 3 players in 3 games had been hit above the shoulders. And at a certain point, like, I don't know, like I don't know. I was sort of
Was that
reacting.
Washington sending a message to the Mets though?
No, probably not. But I was a fan, so I reacted to it anyway. No, but probably not. The thing I will say about unwritten rules and hitting people is that, like, I think unwritten rules aren't going anywhere. I think they are just shifting. Because anytime you have a game or competition or arena really of any kind, you're always going to have these underlying customs that you adhere to. Now, I think the clash in recent years of the quote unquote unwritten rules is simply, I think it's simply generational. I think it is a generation that is used to baseball being almost like an offshoot of golf, in that it's a buttoned up suburban family
Gentleman's game.
right, a gentleman's game, exactly.
Pastoral.
Right, exactly. And I think that it sort of has these tie-ins to nostalgic rural suburban childhoods of quiet, of aspiring to be buttoned up gentlemen, and look, like, that's and that's what they project onto the game and their understanding of the game. I think older generations, that's all right. That's what sports, well, to a degree, when it becomes racialized, as you mentioned earlier, that's when it becomes extremely toxic. And we always have to be vigilant against that, no matter how much progress we make. But the thing, well, not but, it's a separate thought. The thing I will say is that I think it's just a clash in understanding of the game. I think younger generations see home runs as these flashy moments of excitement, and of I see them that way. They're exciting, and I think it's just a different understanding of sports and competition. I think younger generations are more inclined to trash talk, or more inclined to celebrate in sort of verbose ways, because I think that is just how our generation kind of approaches things, with a certain carefree, not carefree, because of course these athletes work insanely hard, but a sort of flippant, youthful
Bad
exuberance.
flippant.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. Right. Sort of youthful exuberance that I think is healthy. So I think that if we can find a way to just understand that other people of other generations, of other backgrounds, aren't going to project the same things onto the sport that they love. I think as long as we're mindful of that and we understand that and we are tolerant of it, I think that different understandings of baseball as an entity can exist. Where I end up having issues is when people sort of try to enforce it onto other players. So when somebody flips a bat, you go back and hit them for it. I think that is totally uncalled for. Or like Max, touched on, when they go talk about it in the media and complain about it. I think when they try to enforce their understanding of baseball onto other players, I think that is when you get into an unfriendly environment. And I think it's a good thing that different people are going to project different things on baseball and have a different relationship with baseball. I think that's something that can be celebrated and can be really, really healthy. I just think that when we are trying to turn it into a war, as opposed to something that reflects the diversity of the sport that has made but look, when you look at the American sports, baseball is arguably the most diverse. It is played widely in East Asia. It's played widely in Latin America. It's played in Europe. Even it's played, like, it's soccer is of course the most widely played sport in the world. But when you look at the 4 major American market sports, baseball, hockey, basketball, and football and basketball are, well, basketball is very diverse, but football is very American. It's not really played at a high level anywhere else. But baseball is I think one of the greatest strengths of baseball is its diversity. And I think that if we can find a way to be understanding that people have different understandings and relationships to the game, I think that we will be all the better for it.
Yeah, really well said.
Yep.
I want to talk about a couple more unwritten rules here, because obviously retaliatory hit by pitches are a big one. They're worth mentioning to the extent that we have. But there are so many that come up in conversation with a lot of regularity. This year you've got, bunting or stealing bases when you're up by, 8-9 runs and continuing to play that sort of baseball. In years past, Fernando Tatis Jr. hitting a home run on a 3-0 pitch. There are, and Chip, you touched on it, there are generational customs within the sport that, you end up with guys like Eric Hosmer or Mike Schilt getting really up in arms over these unwritten rules being broken. We're going to talk to Fernando about swinging away 3-0 when we're up by a lot. Mike Schilt getting mad at Antoine Richardson for the call to, drop a bunt when the Giants were up 9-0 last week. What do you guys think of a couple of these other rules and how they're sort of being perceived in the evolution of how we see unwritten rules?
I mean, 3-0, I have no issue with guys swinging. Like, it's Major League Baseball. You don't get a free pitch as a pitcher. If you're worried about him not taking you 450 feet to dead center, don't go 3-0. I mean, like, you're a Major League pitcher. Get over
Or
it.
if you think he's going to swing, don't throw a strike 3-0.
Yeah, exactly. I think when it comes to stealing and bunting with a big lead or bunting to break up a no-hitter or perfect game, those are all also part of the game too. It's a competitive game. I think with base stealing when you're up by like 9 or 10 runs in the 8th inning, I mean, you don't have to do it, but you can. I don't think it, like Chip said, I think that trying to enforce that kind of a mentality and thinking is unproductive. And I think, look, this is a professional sport. I mean, are you worried about hurting your guys' feelings, or are you worried about being embarrassed? I mean, it's a 162 game season. You're allowed to lose games. Like, that's okay. So I think, like Chip said, is, trying to enforce that on somebody else is the real issue.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's totally okay for a player to say, look, or at least to themselves, to think, oh, look, I don't appreciate that bat flip, or I don't appreciate this or whatever. But like, it's about being able to understand that your wounded pride has more to do with the home run than anything else. Because I don't think you would care if they bat flip or strike out. You'd be like, all right, that's ridiculous. But I struck him out, so who cares? So I think on being able to understand that it's, when this discussion first, when I first encountered this kind of, line of discussion a few years ago, I was thinking back to when I was, a kid watching Ranger hockey games. I would hate when they were playing a road game, when the Rangers were playing a road game and the other team scored, because then the crowd would get all excited and I would be all upset about the goal and they would be all excited about it. And that sort of compounded a little bit. So I think there's a little bit of a natural emotional response there, but I think it's super important for, grown professional adults to understand that their, annoyance lies as much, if not more so, in the home run itself, to which the response is not to blame the player. I mean, come on. Do you want him to take 3 strikes down the middle and just walk back to the dugout. It's competition. It would be terrible if, that's how it worked. But like being able to understand that and being able to understand that other people are going to view and enjoy the game differently. And I think I think that's something to be celebrated. And I think as a player, you have the responsibility, as a citizen of the league, to consider that and to talk to your peers about it, and to sort of think about all of the different backgrounds and perspectives that come onto a field together, to play the same game that they all love, and that's what they share. And you're bringing all of these different things into it, and different generations, different ethnicities, different, so many different backgrounds. I think that you sort of have a responsibility to think about that and consider perspectives. And once you do that, I think the clash and the desire to criticize and, enforce a baseball worldview, I think that diminishes when you sort of come at it with that perspective and an open mind, as things often do when you go at them with an open mind. So I think that as a player, you have the responsibility to sort of confront that.
Chip, you brought up a really good point. When we started, I think you said unwritten rules don't go away; they shift. Am I quoting you correctly?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was
okay. Major League Baseball, as we know, the game 163, that's gone now.
Right.
The tiebreaker is run differential. So Major League Baseball essentially passed legislation to incentivize running up the score. That's a big move right there. I don't know if it is huge. I don't know if getting at that unwritten rule of not running up the score was a motivation in reforming the playoff system, or if it's just or if chipping away at that unwritten rule is just a cute little ancillary benefit of this new playoff system. But Major League Baseball, for a few years there, they were saying let the kids play. Now they're actually changing rules to really allow them to play. I expect that even the most pragmatic old school manager will start to let that go, not running up the score, and actually want to do it, realizing that their team's destiny and maybe even their livelihood could be on the line if they don't run up the score. That could be the difference between not making the playoffs and making it. So I think that's probably one of the weaker unwritten rules out there. I think we'll see that fall by the wayside. Other ones, we could debate that all day. What's the borderline between personal expression and fun versus sportsmanship? That's another thing that we could debate quite a bit. Maybe it's intent versus impact. That's just really the crux of the culture war that we're seeing in baseball. What's that line, sportsmanship versus fun? And are they compatible?
Yeah, but Ben, you bring up an interesting point there, just about the now disappearance of game 163 and almost incentivizing running up the score. Because what's going to happen off the field, we'll say, when two teams through 162 games are tied with, 87 and 75 record. One team scores 3 more runs than the other team over the course of 162 and gets that 6th playoff spot, when a team with the same record is just out now. They don't get a chance to say, all right, we'll go to your ballpark and we'll play that 163rd game and get a chance to, earn our spot. This is, and, drawing that comparison is huge here, because now you're taking the unwritten rules and you're essentially making them written. Maybe not verbatim, maybe you're not saying, we want you to score as many runs and allow as few runs as possible. But you're saying that's going to have an impact. in how the league plays out. And, earlier in the episode here, Chip, you talked about the Braves going on a run in September, making the playoffs, going all the way and winning a World Series.
Right.
You're going to have a 6 seed at some point win a World Series. And that team could be someone who gets in by run differential under the new rule.
And the Nats
not
won in
even that,
2019 as a wild card.
The Giants in 2014 won as a wild card.
Yeah.
The worst team in the history of the world, the 2006 Cardinals.
You're a Mets fan.
Well, why is Aaron Heilman pitching in the?
Why isn't Carlos Beltran swinging at Adam Wainwright's curveball in the ninth inning?
Adam Wainwright's curveball is one of the best pitches in like our generation. So I mean, like, relax. But like, yeah, Dwayne Sanchez, goddamn cab driver, got him in a count. Oh. It is only the Mets would miss out on going to the World Series because one of their high leverage relievers got in a cab accident during the season.
We were missing a little bit of Mets commentary in this episode, so I'm glad we got to it.
I just want to be normal bad. That's all I want. Just want to be normal bad. Like, I want to be normal bad. I don't want my $100 million outfielders getting attacked by wild animals. I just want to not be good at baseball. That's all I want.
It's not going to happen under Uncle Steve.
What?
Didn't happen under the Wilpons. It's not going to happen under Steve Cohen.
Well, I don't know. Steve Cohen's not the Mets are going to be, they're never not going to be abnormal. They just might be abnormal and good, which, that's fine. But like, I don't want to wake up to news that Jacob deGrom was abducted by aliens. Like, Yohan Assessment is missing, but he's okay. What do you mean? He's missing. How do you know that? Oh my God. What a weird.
One of the biggest unwritten rules of baseball is that the Mets must always be weird.
Yeah.
The Mets must always be close to death. Every player must be like on his deathbed in order for them to be. They can't
die normally. Like, none of them are dying of old age. They're getting bitten by snakes or
literally snake bitten.
Yeah, like
that's you hear that in baseball all the time.
I wouldn't be shocked if a Mets player is missed time because I got bitten by a rattlesnake or something. I wouldn't be shocked. Go look through history. I bet that's happened. Oh my God.
Yeah.
There's years of just, I have years of grievances against the Mets.
Might have a lawsuit.
Yeah. Oh my God. If I ever become a lawyer, I'm gonna get disbarred because I tried to class action sue the Mets for emotional abuse.
Heard it here first, folks.
That Better Call Saul, New York edition.
I don't know, George. I mean, to your point, right? It's a long season. I mean, I'm sure there are ways that you could amend that rule where it's, if it's under 3 runs, under a 3-run differential or something, then go play a game. I don't know. I mean, pick a number, then you can go play game 163. But anything above,
it's gonna feel arbitrary, though.
Right. It is gonna feel arbitrary, but like the whole premise of a 162 game season is to eliminate arbitrary happenings, right? Like, that's what the length of the season does. That's what's so beautiful about baseball, is that the regular season is not a fluke, right? You can't fake your way through a season, for the most part.
Well, that's the big thing that happened with the Yankees, Red Sox, and Blue Jays last year. The Yankees and Red Sox were not that great down the stretch, and the Blue Jays were tearing it up. But over the course of 162, the Yankees and Red Sox won one more game, and the Blue Jays missed the playoffs.
Yep.
That's just how the game works, and you're exactly right. You play a full season, you're going to have legit results. So, I mean, you play 162. How often has a game 163 happened? We often, as long as I've been following baseball, most of my entire life, you go years between game 163s. You get to mid-September and you got Jason Stark or John Heyman saying, well, here's how a 5-way tie could happen in the American League this year. And here's an entire article about what the tiebreakers would be and who would go where. I think, for the sake of not having that conversation about, picking opponents and, strategizing your gameplay based on whether you'd rather, I'll use it last year as an example again, whether you'd rather go to Boston or stay home against Toronto if you're the Yankees in a potential game 163 or 164 that was on the table last year.
So crazy.
You're not going to have those conversations anymore, which I think is a good thing. As great as the drama of game 163 or the one game wild card play-in, as great as the drama of those events were, you still have, in the wild card series, you'll have game 3s. In the division series, you've got game 5s. LCS World Series, greatest 2 words in sports, game 7. There's still going to be drama.
Yeah.
And that, to come full circle here on the episode, that's what's best about baseball. You get drama. Maybe it's not a mid-August game, between the Phillies and Reds. I don't even know if they're playing in August this year, but I'll use them as an example. Maybe it's not a 105 game between the Phillies and Reds that ends, 6-3. There's not a lot of drama there, but it's baseball. Maybe there's a benches clearing incident in that 6-3 Phillies win over the Reds. And there's your drama because someone hit a home run on a 3-0 pitch and then got plunked the next time up.
Yeah, I mean, George, that's such a great point, right? That the majority of each team's 162 games probably going to be pretty boring and not very noticeable. But it's the accumulation of games across 6 months. It's the playing every day. It's the grind. It's the trade deadline, the all-star break. It's the stuff that breaks up the season. And then it's the flair for the dramatic, even in May or June, but especially in September and October with walk-offs, with with rubber matches that are like to die for. It's the 3-game wild card. It's the 5-game DS series, the 7-game LCS, and the 7-game World Series. That's really like that's the essence of baseball. It's the flair for the dramatic, not the drama over the course of the entire season. It's the moments, right? It's the moments that we remember more than the overall season itself, right? You're going to remember the moments from the season, like the perfect game that almost was last week with Clayton Kershaw.
That almost boned me in fantasy.
But it's stuff like that you're going to remember, right? You're not going to pick out, oh, it was game 76 for the Red Sox where they won 7-2 over the Yankees and nothing happened. It was like a 3.5-hour game. There's nothing special. But you'd remember that game in October because it's playoff baseball. Like that is what matters. Not the buildup. It's the result. And you get the result in playoff baseball like this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So any final thoughts on unwritten rules, power rankings, playoff baseball, 162, the Mets and their weird ways?
Oh my God.
What do you guys have?
This is going to be, I think it's going to be an exciting season. Clayton Kershaw looks back to form, which is unfair for the Dodgers. Unfair for their opponents. Because now you got Walker Buehler. Andrew Heaney looks weirdly good. I can imagine them.
Don't rub it in.
Pitching factory, making him filthy.
Hey, pitching factory. Alex Cobb and Carlos Rodon going to San Francisco.
Yeah, the Giants pitchers tomorrow are Cobb and Webb.
Cobweb. First one of the year.
Is that a
That's,
thing?
you talk about great. They've been marketing it as such.
Oh man, I saw that today. I was like, oh, I discovered this.
I mean, they haven't been like T-shirts or whatever. It's too early in the season before, they're each pitching a 1.5 ERA in August.
My Lola wants to know if you can get that cobweb.
Yeah, you got games like Max Scherzer and Logan Webb tomorrow night at Citi Field. The Giants and Mets, they're two of my playoff teams, as we said in the first episode. I've got them each as division winners.
Oh, okay.
That kind of environment at Citi Field, pack the house. It's going to be a good game.
I know.
There are going to be some October atmosphere type
I am
moments in that game.
I'm upset I can't go, but like, it's hard to go from school, especially when you have stuff the next day, and like, but I wanted to go so bad.
Those two will match up in October.
Well,
and when that happens, when we do an episode, I will come back, find this clip, and post it on social media and say I was right.
You don't think that between now and then, some Met is going to have been, arrested in some racketeering scheme involving like exotic animals or something? Like, are you like, come on?
Yeah, Bobby Bonilla.
Like Bobby Bonilla, and Max Scherzer were involved in trafficking in primates from Southeast Asia. Like, come on.
Is this a Seinfeld episode or the New York Mets? That sounds more like Kramer and Newman.
Yeah, the Kramer and Newman have been playing for the Mets for 20 years.
And you got any final thoughts for us?
Nice game, pretty boy.
I follow that up. As far as the drama, somebody put it very succinctly for me once. Every team wins 60 games. Every team loses 60 games. It's the 42 games that occur in the middle that matter. The problem is we have no idea which of those 162 are the 42 pivotal games.
That is true.
And I doubt that any major league player or manager will admit this publicly. Maybe they'll commiserate privately. If something does not end up in their favor, they may think back and go, wow, that humid game in Texas, we were so tired. We were kind of dogging it. If we had just scored 2 or 3 or 4 more runs, we could have won that game and we'd finish, another slot ahead in the standings and we'd be in the playoffs now. Nobody's going to admit to that. But, if it means going to or watching as many games as I can in partial or in full, I can think of far worse things to do than a day of baseball.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
well, Coach, we thank you for being with us. We're definitely going to try to have you back on the pod at some point soon. Always love talking to you. Always love talking baseball with you,
gentlemen, again.
Yeah.
Someday I'll get back there.
Man,
We'll meet in person someday.
Yeah.
For sure. We all got to go to a con game together. Just
Yes,
chirp
go.
from the dugout.
Oh boy.
All right. That should just about do it for this episode of Shout at the Plate. We'll talk to you guys soon. Watch some good baseball. Have a good night.